So one thing you need to know about coloring something in a somewhat realistic style, semi-realism, is, like I said, understanding lighting and shadows. So I will do that. I will show you an example using something very simple. So I'm going to draw a ball, a circle. I will be turning this circle into a, what's it called now, a sphere. Yeah. So now that I've drawn this ball now, the first thing we'll do is, where is the light going to be coming from? So I'm going to create a few layers. One will be pointing the direction of the light I want. So this time I'm going to use a light coming directly from above, directly. So with that in mind, where is the shadow going to be? The shadows are going to appear like this. So this whole part of the ball would be in shadow, and it will also be casting a shadow on the ground. So these are the two types of shadows. This is called a form shadow, and this is called a cast shadow. So the difference between the two is, a cast shadow appears when an object is preventing the light from hitting another object. So the second object in this case now is the ground, and the ball now is casting a shadow on the ground. So that's a cast shadow. But a form shadow is a shadow formed when a part of an object is not facing the light. You get? So the object is not casting a shadow on itself. It's just this part of the object is not facing the light. So once you have that in mind now, let's start implementing the actual shadows. So I'm going to, this layer I created, I'm going to clip it. What I do, I use blending modes for my shadows. So multiply, I'm going to choose a color. Then I use this tool, it's called the lasso fill tool. I just, anything you draw, it's just form that for you. So that's what I use to shade most times. So we begin. So like I said now, I'm going to draw out the shadow. This is form shadow. Then for another layer, I'm going to create a shadow for the ground. So something like this. It's not going to be perfect, I just want it so at least so you can see it. It's going to be a long video, so your data will chop. So once you've done this, don't mind the background noise, rain is falling heavily here. So once you've done this now, this shadow is too dark, I'm going to reduce it a bit. Same with this one. So once you've done this now, one thing you need to know about form shadows is when your form shadow is on a curved surface, when it's on a curved surface, then the shadow is going to be a gradient. It's going to go from light to dark slowly. It's not just going to be one line just separating light and dark. No, it's going to be, this will just be darker until it completely turns into shadow. So with that in mind now, this is where blending now comes into play. So I'm going to blend this shadow. So blending is not hard. You can use a blurring brush, but the blurring brush on this app, I don't like it, so I kind of created my own blending brush to use. So so you understand what I'm doing here. So now it's now going from light to dark slowly. There's going to be transition. So that's the first step of this video. I will stop this video here, then I will send another one. Come on. For the next step, I'm going to be talking about ambient occlusion, the stuff I mentioned in our chat. And what is basically, like I've said before, there are going to be some parts of the shadow that are going to be darker. And the reason why is because there are some places that the light is not going to properly reach. Like say the bottom here of the whatever is you're drawing, light is not going to be able to reach here as much as it is here. You get? So even if there's shadows here, these are still going to be very dark. Another example I can give is, if you close your hand like this, put in a little hole and look into it, you will see that it can almost turn completely black at times. So the reason for that is ambient occlusion. So even though there's light around and there may even be a little bit of shadows, there are just some places that the way maybe it is enclosed or it's in a tight space in between two objects and stuff like that, but places like that are going to end up very, very dark. So that's ambient occlusion. If you look at my artwork, you'll see the shadows vary. They are not just one color all through. So I'm going to be implementing that. So I'll create a new layer for that. I don't usually put my doing here is strong. So I don't usually put my ambient layer on the same layer as my shadows, my base shadows. So I'm going to do that. So like I've done before, I'm going to create a new, I'm going to mark that side out. Yeah. Then I'm also going to do it for the cast shadows because the ambient occlusion also affects cast shadows. So yes. The closer it is to the ball, the darker it's going to be. I think that's good. So something like this. Then I'm going to blend it like I blended the other stuff. So yeah, as you can see, it is starting to look a little bit more realistic than it was. I think this button should even be darker than this. I'm going to edit this a bit. Let's color. Yeah, that's better. So now that I've done that, the next thing is lighting or highlights and stuff. So what you need to know about highlights is there are different types of highlights. There's something called, how do I put it, bounce light. So what bounce light does is when your light is coming from a direction, it can bounce off another surface and go into another direction. So in this case now, the light can bounce off the ground and hit the ball. You get from different direction. Bounce off the ground, hit the ball. Bounce off the ground, hit the ball. You get. So in this case now, I usually use add for my lighting layers. So I'm going to just pick a gray color for this. I don't want to start picking colors. So I'm going to draw out a plane to indicate that light is hitting the ground and touching the ball. This is too bright, so I'm going to reduce it because bounce light isn't usually going to, not usually, bounce lights are not that bright unless the light source is very harsh, like say you're standing under hot sun, but usually it's not going to be very bright. Usually if the light source is not even that bright in the you're not even going to have any bounce light at all. So yeah, that's this one. So you can see it is faint. It shouldn't be very bright in the first place. Then the last thing now I'm going to show you now is the highlights. So the highlight is just the way, just the way the shadows slowly transition from very dark to light. It's also how the light, so if the shadow starts from here, the very top of where the light is, meaning the part of the object that faces, that is closest to the source of light, you should indicate it that that place is going to be more lit up than the rest of the rest of your object. So we're going to add that light. So like I did before, I'm not using a colorful light. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that. This is just to indicate this part of the ball is closest to the light. So I'll blend it out like I've been doing. So yeah, that's basically it. Then the next thing you need to know is that a lot of these things I've said, they vary depending on the material that you are working with. So if this was a metal ball, like iron, the lighting on top would be very harsh. So it will be something like this. Whatever the light source look like, it can be a window. So let me see if it's a window now. I'm going to draw a window of light. Something like this. Then the bounce light will also be brighter than it. And it will not be blended the way I blended this one. So maybe something like this. As you can see, it starts to look more like metal art a bit. Even the shadows will look a little bit more harsher, so maybe something like this. So what you can do now is just observe your environment, see how the lighting and shadows and stuff interact with each other. That's basically how to get semi-realism and stuff.